Shachar. I'm currently work at a young startup called Verbit, but I'm here to speak about a project that I'm most proud of that we did in my former company, FeedVisor. I gave it like a big title, how to build a predictive customer health model. What I would like to, maybe to help some of you do, how to make your customer health score matter. Okay, so let's take an example of a potential customer that churned from us. When he churned from us, we know the following. We know that the customer didn't log into the product. We also know that they stopped responding to their CSM. We know that he has many open support tickets and that he has a very low license utilization percentage. Many times we focus on the question, what is the churn reason? Here in this presentation, I would like to go back and ask the question, what was the first indicator to this? Because when we talk about customer health score, we need and we try to find the first indicator that eventually, if we could predict this, maybe we didn't get all of the other reasons that we eventually did. To share a bit about the background to this project, so if we look at a CSM portfolio, we know that they manage between 1 million to 2 million ARR as a benchmark of the industry, which converts to between 20 to 200 accounts on different lifetime stages. The CSM either manages or supports renewal and upsell efforts, and on top of that, they're required to monitor accounts, maintain a relationship, and be the point of contact between the customer and the product. The reason that I put all this is just to share that eventually the things that the CSM has to do are much bigger than the time they need to do it. They have to do it. So this was the background to why we built a customer health score, and eventually the customer health score is supposed to help the CSM answer the following question: who should I speak with today and why? So in this talk, we're going to discuss about three topics. Why and when do you need to build a customer health score? After that, what are the steps to build a successful customer health score? And the third part, for me, it's the most important one of this presentation: how can you measure the effectiveness of the customer health score? So let's start. So just as a issue, I don't know how to say it in English, what is the customer health score? So a customer health score, a definition that I really like is the ability to understand a customer health based on multiple dimensions of customers' data metrics. So in SaaS companies, we have the ability to track tons of data points that if we were an on-premise software, then we weren't able to do. So we need to take this as an advantage and look at different dimensions between us and the customer. After that, the score can be presented either in colors, score 1 to 100, scale A to F. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to focus on the tools here. Just everything can work. The goals, as I see it, for a good customer health score is that it will help both the CSM and the company in prediction, because we're here to predict who is going to renew, who is going to upsell, and who is going to churn, and also prioritization. So if we look at the, I was head of customer success operations at FeedVisor, and my goal was to make the team more efficient, and by allowing them to prioritize well, they could achieve they could talk to more customers, and they knew why they need to speak to any one of the customers. I'm going to share with you now the process that we did in FeedVisor and how our customer health score back there evolved. Our first steps with customer health score. So the ancestor of the customer health score was one field in Salesforce. We call it churn probability. The CSM will have to maintain it, and this was basically our health score. The issue with this is it based 100% on a sentiment, on a subjective CSM sentiment. So when we were 5 CSMs in the Tel Aviv office, it was okay, but when we grew and we expanded to 3 locations, we needed to have a better alignment on what is critical, what is high, what is medium, what is low. We then purchased a tool. We did the implementation of customer health model with Totango. Many of those of the definition were based on a gut feeling because we didn't have data to rely on. We didn't know what makes our customer successful and what not. So we built 2 profiles, one for onboarding, one for ongoing, and we defined between 6 to 7 criteria based on what we believed a successful customer is. The first version, we didn't know that it was the first version back then. We ran it live for 8 months. Then we said, okay, it's a good time to understand and most importantly, analyze what we achieved so far, and if this customer health score help us to prioritize and help us to predict. I'm going to share with you the analysis that we actually did and the takeaways that we learned from this analysis. First, we wanted to look hits. Were we able to mark accounts that churn as poor? And here the results were good. 81% of the customers that churned, we marked them as poor. They were poor on the week of the churn. You can tell, okay, on the week of churn, it's not good enough. So we drilled down and understood how long in advance we marked them as poor. Because if we marked them as poor 1 week before, not so great, because we don't have any way maybe to prevent this churn. Here, the picture was not that great. We saw that 45% of the accounts that churned, we either didn't mark them as poor or we marked them as poor less than a month. So telling that something is not going well, but not giving enough time to try to fix it wasn't good enough for us. The third thing that we wanted to check is what made the account poor. So what was the first indicator that led this account being poor? We saw here that in over 50% of the cases, it was the same ancestor, the same field that the CSM marked. So it means that we didn't rely on objective data metrics to mark an account as poor, which was okay, because the ancestor, we were 100, now we are at 50%. It's not that great, but it's something that we had to fix. The last thing that we checked is the percentage of false alarms. So we know that we mark accounts on poor when they churn. The other question is customers that choose to renew with us, do we mark them as poor as well? And here we saw that 36% of the customers that renew, we mark them as poor, which means that we don't do forecasting that well. We built the second version of the customer health score when knowing that we need to fix the following. We need to have a better and automated early signals, and we need to find a better ways to predict renewals. When we built the second version, so we created a holistic process that we kept doing on every iteration and every version of the customer health score, and I'm going to share with you the process. I'm going to focus on some steps more than the other. So first one, you need to define the profiles. Do you want to measure onboarding and ongoing separately? Do you want to measure it based on different packages, based on different product? All is okay. You need to find the profiles that are relevant to your team. After that, you need to think about what are the criteria that you're going to measure. What makes an account green? What makes an account red? And here, this slide is only in the theoretical level. Those are the dimensions that we chose to measure. The first one is awareness. First, we need to make sure that we have the ability to understand how our customers are doing. Even if the outcome of the relationship with us and the customer is not that great, we need first to have the visibility to the process, to the communication with the customer. So here we can measure stuff like, are we speaking to them according to the cadence that we define? Are we following up on a poor NPS score? So the first one is awareness. The second one is relationship. What are the actual outcomes of the relationship between us and the customer? So are we showing them a good ROI? Do they have many open support tickets that might disturb the communication between us and them? How many unpaid invoices? So we at FeedVisor found a very, very large correlation between not paying invoices and eventually churning. So this is an indicator that we had to take into consideration. So these two are mostly discussed about the relationship between us and the customer. What you will see here, it's the usage. So we split usage into two different types of usage. The first one, we called it usage of scale. How deep is the customer invested with our product? So we want to make the customer to be as addicted as possible to our platform, because then switching our solution will be more difficult for them. So usage of scale is how deep. Usage of scope is how wide is the customer dependencies in different use cases. So are we here to solve one use case? It's okay, but then it's replaceable. But if we are solving them an entire flow in their organization, it will be less easy for them to switch us. Again, this was the theoretical level. Now what I recommend you to do is to take these key metrics, build a table and understand based on your business what is good for you. So how do you measure awareness in your organization? How do you manage relationship in your organization? For example, you can see here that under the relationship that we still kept the same churn probability. So the CSM still has the ability to mark an account as poor. So what is usage of scale? What is usage of scope? So each business needs to understand, and each product and each touch model needs to understand how the things can look in their business. And it's a combination of auto alerts, as you can see, and subjective CSM sentiments. Sorry. After that, the second step is to create follow-up items. So we mark criteria. What we need to do now is to provide a best practice to the CSM, what we expect them to do in each and every one of the criteria. So we have a common knowledge. People do stuff that we know that are more successful, so we can either automate it or to provide them what we recommend them to do. For example, one of the criteria that led to poor at FeedVisor is if the customer didn't log in for 14 days. So as a best practice, we offered the CSM, we sent them this alert, and offered them to click on an active days email. When they do it, it opened them a template of an email that they could only add the customer name and send it to the customer. Actually, this specific campaign had a 70% success, meaning the 70% of the customers that got this email actually logged in after. So in a very seamless way, we were able to find a bad indicator and to make him, and basically to remove it. So the suggestion is to create a follow-up item on every criteria that you have. It could be also good criteria. So for example, we build an upsell leads machine that looks into different data metrics and suggests the CSM, okay, this might be a good upsell opportunity, and then they could either reject it or convert it into opportunity, and then to manage an upsells. I have 5 minutes, I see, okay. This for me is the most important part of this entire presentation, because this is the way for us to measure if our health score is successful or not. And what we did here, and I suggest you to do something similar, is after you release a version of a customer health score, you do something that we call it micro-level analysis. It's a work, but it's an investigation on every renewal and every churn case that you had. And what you try to understand in this micro-level analysis, what impact the prediction? What impact the prediction? Is it successful? Was it not? What were the criteria? And it's most important to understand that setting up a customer health score, it's not something that you set it and forget it. You need to constantly monitor and improve it. After that, after that you have enough data to rely on, you do something that we call micro-level analysis. We get feedback from the CSM to understand from them if the reason and the criteria make sense. And we have effectiveness metric analysis that I'm going to share in the next slide, that it was an objective measurement to see if we were successful enough in this version of the customer health score. After we did all of this, we go to the next iteration when we do the same cycle. We define or redefine in the customer profiles, defining the metrics, and the retrospection. And the health score effectiveness metrics that we did, first, we wanted to measure the hits. Hits basically is the percentage of the customers that we mark them as poor, and eventually out of the customers that churn. So here we are going to answer the question: did we predict the churn? Again, even if this number is high, it's not that great, because we want to make sure that we got this poor enough time in advance. So the second metric, aging, is how long in advance we could predict this poor. So here what we did is we calculated the percentage of poor at least 4 weeks before the churn out of the customers that churn. We started with 4 weeks before churn, we increased it to 8, we increased it to 10. We wanted to make sure that we have early signal system. After that, we wanted to measure our automation score, meaning out of the customers that churn and we mark as poor, what was the first indicator that marked them as poor? Was it the CSM subjective sentiment, which is okay, but if eventually 100% of the poors are because of the CSM sentiment, then I don't have anything to do to build a score. I can just keep it with the CSM sentiment. So we wanted to check the man versus machine, how well our automation alerts work. And lastly, we wanted to also to measure the false alarms. Are we giving bad predictions to our CSM? So here we calculated the percentage of the customers that renew under poor based on the entire customer that renew. This is my last slide. I'm going to share. I want to share with you the actual results that we had in FeedVisor. It's a process that took us around a year and a half to get to the results that you will see here. So from HIT's perspective, again, HIT's is the customers that churn and we mark them as poor. We increased from 81% to 100% at Q3, meaning that every customer that churn, we mark them as poor, which is okay.
But that means that the action item that you take in order not to churn them doesn't work.
Not necessarily. I wish I had time to answer it, but I just want to complete it before. The second metric is aging. So how long in advance we could predict this churn. So we started with 55% on 4 weeks. We were able to increase this to around 80%, 75%. Then what we did here in Q2, we increased the target to 8 weeks before churn, and we were able to achieve this target as well. And then we increased the targets to 10 weeks. So by Q3, 88% of the customers that churn, we mark them as poor at least 10 weeks before they churn. Automation, so we increased from 50% based on CSM sentiment to only 5% based on CSM sentiment. And here, again, the first indicator of poor was an automated system. And lastly, the false alarm decreased from 36% to 9%, meaning that in less than 10% of the cases, our health system didn't work. And on top of that, this is our churn trend. It's a different axis, so don't try to, it's not like we had 100% churn, but you can see that the churn trend also decreased, maybe because we had a better visibility to our customers. Unfortunately, I don't think that we have time for questions. I know that now I'm in another company and I'm excited to do this process again. I know that it takes time, it takes patience, and most especially, you need to track and collect data as much as you can. If you have any questions, then this is my email. I will be here as well after. Thank you.